For a century, it's been one of history's most chilling tales, right? A pharaoh's curse that promises death to anyone who dares disturb his eternal rest. But what if the truth isn't supernatural at all? What if it's scientific? What if the real killer was microscopic? Let's follow the evidence together and see if we can finally crack this mystery.
I mean, that's really the question at the heart of it all. Did a long-dead king actually have the power to reach across 3 millennia and snuff out the lives of modern explorers? To understand how this all started, we have to look at the event that kicked off the panic.
The man was Lord Carnarvon. He was the wealthy aristocrat who paid for the entire expedition to find Tutankhamun's tomb. And just a few months after he became one of the first people to step inside it in 3,000 years, he was dead. But his death alone isn't what sparked a global freakout. It was the timing.
Get this, as Lord Carnarvon took his last breath in his hotel room, all the lights in Cairo went out. A massive, sudden blackout right at that very moment. A creepy coincidence or something else? Oh, but the story doesn't even stop there.
All the way back on his estate in England, Carnarvon's favorite dog reportedly let out a howl and then just died. No warning, no reason. A man in Cairo, a whole city's power grid, and a dog thousands of miles away, all connected in this one moment of death. Yeah, the stage was set for a legend to be born.
So, how did we get to this point? To really get a grip on the so-called curse, we've got to go back to the beginning, that moment of pure, jaw-dropping discovery.
You have to picture it. For years, this guy Howard Carter had been digging in the sand, searching the Valley of the Kings. He was about to lose his funding. This was his last chance. And then, his team found it. A hidden staircase leading down to a sealed door, with the name of a boy king nobody really cared about, Tutankhamun.
When Lord Carnarvon, standing anxiously behind him, asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter could only manage this iconic reply. And he wasn't kidding. He was looking at gold, chariots, priceless statues, a treasure trove untouched for millennia. It was the archaeological find of the century. But with that wonder, a warning seemed to follow.
Because almost immediately after the tomb was opened, a series of strange, tragic events started to happen. And this created a pattern that the newspapers of the day, well, they couldn't possibly ignore it. The first weird event was just dripping with symbolism. Carter had a pet canary, a little bird he kept at the dig site. It was found dead in its cage, killed by a cobra. Now, in ancient Egypt, the cobra was the sacred protector of the pharaoh. For the superstitious workers and for the world watching, this was no accident. This was strike one.
And this timeline really shows you how the whole story just snowballed. After Lord Carnarvon's death in 23, the list just kept getting longer. You can see it here. A radiologist who worked on the mummy, another team member, one by one, people connected to the discovery started dying. And with every single death, the headlines got bigger, and the legend of the mummy's curse was basically set in stone.
Okay, but this is where the whole story takes a very sharp turn. See, for a curse to be real, it has to, well, exist, right? It's got to be written down somewhere. So people had to ask the most basic question you could think of.
This right here is the whole ball game. We've all heard some version of this super dramatic warning. It is the absolute foundation of the entire curse legend. So, was it there? Was it carved into the walls of the tomb?
And the answer is no, not at all. The most famous part of this entire story, that ancient warning from the pharaoh, it's a total myth. It was never there.
So, where did it come from? It was basically made up by newspapers to sell more papers. They were feeding this global frenzy, probably lifting the idea from popular fictional mummy stories that were all the rage back then. It was a media invention, plain and simple, not an archaeological fact.
So, with the supernatural warning completely debunked as media hype, that central mystery was still hanging in the air. Why were all these people dying? If it wasn't some magical curse, investigators had to start looking for a real, physical culprit. And this is where the story shifts from archaeology to biology.
This is where the real detective work starts. We have to look for a killer that's invisible, that's ancient, and that could be deadly. And the answer might have been sealed up inside that tomb the whole time. So, meet our prime suspect, pathogenic microbes. You can think of them as microscopic booby traps. When that tomb was sealed, it trapped everything inside. Not just treasure, but air, food offerings, all kinds of organic stuff. And for 3,000 years, bacteria and toxic molds, things like aspergillus, just sat there, dormant, waiting. When Carter finally broke that seal, he wasn't just letting light in, He was letting that ancient pathogen-filled air out. And for anyone with a weak immune system, breathing in those ancient spores could absolutely trigger a deadly infection.
And once you lay out the actual facts, the mystery really starts to fade. First, Lord Carnarvon was already in pretty poor health. A simple mosquito bite gets infected, and remember, this is the 1920s, before antibiotics. That alone could kill you. Many of the other deaths were just unrelated coincidences, hyped up by the media. But the most compelling scientific theory is that exposure to those ancient toxic microbes in the tomb's air triggered severe infections in people who were already vulnerable.
So we have the legend and we have the science. And when you put them side by side, you find this really fascinating irony at the core of this whole thing. I mean, the contrast is just wild. The legend gives us a powerful pharaoh with dark magic. The science points to a physically fragile boy king who died young. The legend talks about a supernatural warning from beyond the grave. Science points to something very natural, ancient toxic mold. And that inescapable curse? Turns out, it was just inescapable media hysteria.
And if you want the single biggest piece of evidence that just demolishes the curse theory, here it is. 16. That is how many years Howard Carter, the man who literally opened the tomb, lived after making his discovery.
When reporters would constantly bother him about the curse, this was his simple, powerful answer. The man who should have been victim number 1 completely outlived the hysteria and died of natural causes at 64. And really, that's the big takeaway here. The story of King Tut's tomb isn't really about a magical curse at all. It's about how a perfect storm of media hype, spooky coincidences, and the very real dangers of ancient microbiology can create a legend that lasts for a century. The truth, in this case, is actually way more interesting than the fiction.